but I've got your name on there. It says that we are officially live, so it's got about a 15-second delay from right now. I'll pull it up for comments, and we'll just start a beautiful conversation, and I'm so excited to see where it goes.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right, here we are. All right, so go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
So my name is Philippe Lewis. I am a coach. I also write, even though I haven't written a book. I'm basically a microblogger. I write a lot about masculinity for sure, but mostly about morality. And the way I coach my clients is by supporting them in making better choices for themselves and others in connection and trust, which is my definition of sovereignty. So morality and ethics go a long way when you're talking about sovereignty, because if you're going to make a choice for yourself, you want to make, ideally you want to make sure that it's not hurting other people, or it's not making their life harder, because otherwise they're going to come back after you, and then you have conflict. So my take about the whole thing is that the more responsibility we can take for our own selves first, and then taking responsibility for others second, once we have ourselves kind of figured out, it allows us to create good relating, and then beyond that, we also have to learn to have healthy vulnerability, so that other people can take care of us as well. And this way, we can create solid, healthy, secure, interdependent relationships. And so beyond that, I talk a lot about attachment theory, which kind of plays a big role, and it's probably one of the most accurate systems of how we get into deep relating with specific people, and especially our lovers and our partners. So that's kind of the gist of what I'm about and what I support people with and what I like to geek out on. And masculinity is a part of that, like the way men engage either sexually or emotionally, and the ways they engage well and the ways they don't engage so well, because we're socialized to practice certain ways more than others, and women more than others too, in different ways. So that's the gist of it.
That's great. So for those of you who know me already and those who don't, hello, I'm Ashley Dye. I am a sexologist and a complementary therapist in terms of transformational coaching and teaching others to just embrace that wholehearted, authentic version of themselves. And I've actually never met Felipe before, so this is really exciting.
I am not a plant.
He was recommended by someone in my post call out to chat about masculinity, and we're new friends online, but this is going to be fun because I don't know where it's going to go, and some of the best conversations happen this way. So I am in the US and you're in Canada, yes?
No, I'm Canadian. I'm originally from Montreal, so I'm French Canadian. So you could say I'm an immigrant, even though I don't look like it. But if you listen to me for long enough, you'll be like, yeah, there's a little bit of an accent there. And that's because my first language is French. I currently live in Oakland, near San Francisco in California. And I've been here for a while, like 20 some years. So this is my home. But I would say I could still feel the differences in culture from where I grew up versus being in, I mean, obviously, but you would think that if I've been almost half of my life here, that I would have embraced the culture, and still no. So it's really fascinating, even though the cultures are similar and I've been here for a while, that I still feel my Canadianness in a big way. And I feel that when I go back to Canada. So, and by the way, I might have a client for you. So I'll wanna talk to you more about this. So and I'm not a plant. I think really I'm looking for a sex therapist or sex coach or somebody like that, which you might be.
Amazing. So just because people can get funny about wording, I am not a sex therapist. I'm not a social worker. I am not seeking those certifications. I'm a spiral practitioner, which is a complementary therapy, and it follows along well with alternative medicine, holistic care and healing. Follows the chakra system as we align our bodies and purging out some of those really big emotions that are pathogens to our body and anchors and installments keeping us stuck in life. And I tell people it's a bit like that angry iceberg. Like, men are usually told they can be happy or angry. And sometimes underneath that anger is, I don't feel seen, heard, validated, trusted, all those other things. But then that manifests in other ways. So what I help people do is figure out what that anchor was, at what age, what installment did that put on your life and your body, and then hold that space for that epic transformation, whether it's they need to yell it out, scream it out, act it out, breathe it out, whatever it is, to purge it from their body so it no longer hinders their evolution.
Yeah, so it moves.
So it moves, yeah. And then I've been in the field of sexology for about the last 5 years and decided I need to get some official certification that comes with it. So I combine them for a beautiful hybrid of what I do. But the Spiral program is an epic transformational piece of what I do. So in creating my project for school, I wanted to do something that aligned with what I might use again in the future. And I always love to bring my spiritual side to academia. Having science and magic meet somewhere, sometimes people start twitching out a bit, but it's a real bit of fun. So thank you so much for joining me and allowing me to pick your brain and to share you with the world and sharing yourself with me in this space. But yeah, so on the academic side, what I want to chat about today, and the conversation can go spiritual, it can go and have every tangent in the world. There's not a lot of structure. I have a couple questions that we'll add, but we'll just see where the conversation goes. But what we're chatting about today is called the gender role conflict. And in a gist, what it means is that psychological state of mind where all the woulds and coulds and shoulds and the be this, do that of the world is kind of contrary to who somebody is. And it manifests in ways like depression, anxiety, relationship strain, struggles in intimacy, if people are even able to be intimate. As we're talking about things that have been passed down generationally, it could be racism, homophobia, other attitudes. And as that conflict arises within men, of course, they're saying they need more research for feminine and women in femininity, but with men in masculinity, there's about 70 mental health diagnoses with signs and symptoms that show up as men are struggling with all the shoulds of the world rather than who they are.
Wow. So would you say that the man box is sort of was sort of that sets of shoulds and should what did you say, shoulds and
just all the rules,
how to be, the rules, exactly. Would you say the man box is that?
Personally, what I would say is that definition is evolving for me with the academic research I've done in this course, and even within this gender role conflict. It's very specific at the very end of it to say, so what we've determined is there's not really a definition about masculinity, but it's more about these characteristics that need to be performed in this way, and it's less about embodying something and more about performance.
Oh, so it's the performative aspect of what it's supposed to look like, which often is sort of the introduction to something, right? Like for example, if you get to know a new culture, you go to Japan and you come back and like, oh, that was really cool, that was really cool, that was really cool, and you try to make some Japanese food, and you maybe brought back a frame or brought back some doodads and knickknacks. And of course, it's a very surface level. So to me, a lot of what these shoulds and these rules, they're initially performed. They have to be performative at first, because unless you have a teacher or someone who embodies these things deeply, which in the case of tourism would look like actually living there and actually becoming embodied within the culture, if all you got is the surface level, what it looks like coming from others, then you don't necessarily get that deeper understanding that allows you to embody it, or the teacher that will say, okay, wax on, wax off. And no, it doesn't look like karate, but eventually you'll have the skills because you'll embody the movements that lead to karate, which is, if you haven't seen Karate Kid, that's kind of the idea.
Right? So that surface level rules, and then where that conflict arises is when this isn't who I am, and what you might see is not who I be, and that conflict that comes with it. So I as we just get started with this, you mentioned a couple things that I added here, but what
Yeah.
are some of the societal pressures? Who are some of these rule makers telling us what we need to do and be and act in the
Oh, I mean,
world, or men specifically?
if you want to look at the classic, the classic sort of route. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like I was just about to break your interview by starting to talk about the meta conversation of, rules versus agreements
We can go
and
there.
what
We can
and
go there.
because that's the way my mind works. But just to answer your question, so I don't just veer off right away with, since we were talking about rule breaking. Uh, Not intentionally, just because that's the way my mind works. I'm like, oh, let's not go the usual route. Let's just go the off route. Okay, so I mean, the ways I think this happens for men in general, and I've certainly felt it pushing against me, is just what I see in the media, is what I see as part of marketing campaigns, or the way the media expresses these sort of superficial, sometimes deeper, but unless the person receiving it has a deeper understanding of the material, which they often don't, if all they've been okay, so I'm going
Go
in
there.
five
Do
different
it.
directions.
Go there.
I'm going five direction. I'm going to pick one. Okay, so I would say at a marketing level, there is no need to go deep, because marketing is about creating needs, or about fulfilling needs, which to some degree is about creating needs, which then people kind of keep running after and never quite fulfill.
Mm,
And it's more market,
mm,
in terms of marketing, it's more advantageous for a company to create a need that is never fulfilled than a need that does get fulfilled, so that there's no more need anymore.
mm. I made a post on this the other day. Keep going.
Yes. Do you feel the alignment arising? That's great.
Totally.
Okay,
Totally.
so marketing is gonna use the surface level, which, and often the surface level that actually is not fulfilled, is not fulfilling, and doesn't lead to fulfillment. And so it's gonna use something that is just about agitating the pain, and you hear that in marketing,
Mm,
agitating the pain. And it's not necessarily like, ideally, a sustainable form of marketing will fulfill the need by really answering it in a way that's healthy, that leads to not needing it anymore. Okay, so
I love
yeah,
you
so of
already.
course, so rules. So if you go back to rules that which you spoke, rules are about handling people's fears. Rules are about, if you fulfill the rule, then everything's okay. Then everything is going to be okay. And if you have rules in a relationship, those are set in place, not in order to in order to make the pain or make the fear stop. So if you tell a man, this is how you be a man, and then you're okay, then you've reached a certain level of whatever it is, or you made enough money, or you've been with enough women, or if you act this way, then you will be okay, then you will be recognized, then there's an end result, which is not really an end result, because all you're doing is performing something. You're portraying something that isn't real, because the thing that is real cannot be handled right away. It cannot be handled in a short performative move. It has to be handled over time. So, what do you do with whole generations of men who were not taught properly how to be men, and I really want to know how to be men? You can't tell them, sorry, it's going to take 10 years, or it's going to take 15 years, or you're going to have to work hard, and it's going to be even more painful than not knowing how to be men. Yeah, that doesn't make for good marketing. And it's not very attractive, and it's not very sexy. And none of it is sexy, really, because being a man is not about being sexy, unless you just want other people to want what you have, which is what a lot of being American is
Yes.
about. Okay, so you've got marketing, you've got movies that are kind of showing a surface level. Not all movies. I mean, there are movies that are showing a deeper cut of what being a man is about, or could be about, or the questions, or the inquiry of what's it like to be a man. Unfortunately, if you're the viewer and you don't have too much of a sense of what's it like to be a man already, then you're only going to perceive to the degree that you're able to perceive it. So if you've done your work about being around being a man and or growing into being a man, only to you've reached level 2 of being a man, then you're only going to perceive things around you up to level 3 maybe, because you're on the verge of reaching that level of development, so to speak. So it's not just about receiving things and saying, "Oh, now I can be a better man." It's really about being put in that uncomfortable position of having to learn what it's like to be a better man, and having other people who are already in that place show you what it's like and show you by example, and helping you handle these hurdles that get in the way of you becoming a better man. Now, movies are not really going to do that. Sometimes you could have a movie that kind of gives you an insight into something that you've maybe perceived before, you've seen before, and you're like, huh, I want to check. Yeah, there's something about that. And there's like old school movies that, whether it's Rocky or whether it's Karate Kid, like I was just giving an example, that gives us a bit of a sense or an insight, and that kind of guides us in the right direction. But what's really missing to me is the idea of teachers and elders really teaching back, teaching their children, teaching their, and people are less and less parents, and elders are seen as so old school, or because they don't believe the same political beliefs that we have, or they don't believe the same, that they don't have the same belief system that we have, and then we miss out on all the insights that they have in other areas that otherwise we would gain from, because they've already embodied some aspects that we could really get something from. But because we don't agree with them on some other levels, we can't really get into that conversation. And it's also not part of the culture. There are cultures like, there are cultures that are maybe more conformist, like Japan. And I have a half Japanese girlfriend, so that comes up for me more in our conversation with her. Um, there's more of a conversation around who your elders are, and respecting your elders and listening to your elders because they have something to teach. So some of the place, the movies marketing, not so great. Men's circle can be really great if they're held by elders, I would say, or parents, or men that are older, not just men that are the same age. And I would say there are teachers, there are mentors out there that are doing the work, that are supporting men, but that's at a very small scale, just like men's circle is a very small scale. Yeah. So large scale, what's out there that really push different aspects of manhood from the very surface level to the deeper level? I mean, books could be it. I know David Data has has sort of pushed some aspects of it, but some people really like him, some people really don't. He's pushing for men to be post level 2, like he wants level 3 men, which is sort of the ability to embody polarity in a healthy, consensual way, and that rubs against people who believe that people should be equal in all possible ways, which then removes some aspects of gender roles. So he believes that gender roles are great, and they could be reversed. He doesn't care about that. He's like, if you're going to be engaging with someone, polarity will give more juice to your relationship than no polarity at all.
Yeah.
So, all right. So these are sort of my thoughts. So going back to rules real quick, rules are very surface, very basic. If you want, so I've looked at what would it look like to develop man from an agreement perspective, like from a sort of a code of ethics, a code of conduct, which is not rules. It's really about like, what are some of the things, how could you approach reality, and how could you approach the world and your partners and everything from the perspective of it will serve you and it will serve reality at the same, or real reality, or the world, or your partners, or your friends at the same time. To me, that's the difference between rules and rules and agreements. Agreements are about serving everyone, and that plays into ethics. Rules are about do this and don't do that. It's too black and white to really develop the discernment that is required in order to engage well with reality moment to moment to moment. All right, okay, I'm going to shut up for a second.
No, it's great. I'm loving this. Keep going.
Okay. Well, ask me another question because I think I've like it. Okay. Quick bit. So the man box is a rule box.
Man
Okay,
box.
that's the way I would yeah, they call it, I've heard it named the man box. Obviously it's different for everyone, depends on cultures, locations, and so on. But this is like the definition. This is how you be a man, right? And we've all heard of men and women too telling their sons, this is how you be a man.
Yes.
Be a man, don't cry, be a man, whatever the heck that means. And not really defining it other than, you see that superhero here, you see this person in the media here or there, like, do more like he's doing. And then it becomes performative because you're trying to imitate. That's a good start.
Yeah.
But it's not the end. You have to go deeper. You have to make it yours. And so authenticity, and I think that's what I'm hearing, the sort of the conflict, the gender conflict that you're speaking of, I'm interpreting as there's the man box with all the rules, and then there's who I am authentically, and how do I reconcile the two?
Mm-hmm.
And so in my work with the Remember Brotherhood journey, we call it, we ask the men to remember what it's like to be a man based on their lineage, but also based on who they are, and bring to the table their own version of manhood as a unique expression of who they are. And so to remove, so in a sense, we're trying to remove the conflict by saying what you've got is what's needed, and what we're wanting to support them is to bring that fully. So it's not about competition, it's about you bring what you got, I bring what I got, and we all share, and we become a team, or we become and we ally with each other around what we can do about what's out there and what's needed, what's the work that's needed. And so it's no longer, we remove the conflict by saying who you are authentically is as much of what it's like to be a man as the next brother. And we all bring that together, and that creates what manhood is like, or is supposed to be. You are what manhood is supposed to be. But I am also what manhood is supposed to be. Because we're all supposed to be exactly who we are. And we can develop ourselves, and we can support each other in becoming accountable to our greater potential. Okay, like we can move forward into becoming better humans and better brothers for each other and for the world, in service to the world and ourselves at the same time. So it's not about becoming narcissistic. It's about really sort of expanding from self to others and moving from there.
Love that. So in this man box, and from your work with men or from your personal experience, what are some of those good characteristics in the man box, or the bad characteristics in the man box?
All right. Hopefully I'm not going to break that question, because I have an expanded version of it. So, okay. So the good characteristics, as I've seen it, they're essentially what is it? Darn, I hope the word doesn't escape me. It's just on the tip of my tongue. It's got me. Okay, so there's a Greek philosophy, and I can't remember the word right now, but it will come back to me in just a minute, which praises the sort of unemotional view of the world. And it's right on the. Oh, I want to search for it. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So it's the unemotional, rational approach to reality. Like, let's look at reality from without reaction, and let's see what's happening. Let's understand the nature of the nature of reality and the nature of what's happening around us, and from there we can understand what would be purposeful. And so, to me, that's a healthy version of what we see the man box is trying to express. It's not to not feel like the man box say, don't, you're either happy or you're angry. So it's very basic. You have to be tough. You have to so these are some of the messages. A lot of them. So if you look at some of the basic masculinity traits, they have a healthy and aware and secure version expression of that. And there's like the shadow expression of that, which is immature, unaware, and insecure. So what we see in the man box appears to be the unaware, insecure, and sort of power hungry, trying to compete, competitive, strong, tough, unemotional, unaffected, avoiding. I mean, a lot of the man box looks like that. They're sort of unhealthy expressions of that Greek philosophy that I can't remember still.
You're talking about like Stoicism?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Great. Like the connection continues. Okay, Stoicism. Yes, Stoicism is like it's like the quintessential masculine when you think about it. There is nothing about Stoicism that isn't masculine. When you think Stoicism, you think a bunch of men. You don't think women, even though women can absolutely express Stoicism. But so if there's a man box culture, there's also a woman box culture, so to speak. There's sort of like the unhealthy, toxic masculine has the toxic, unhealthy feminine as well. But we don't talk about it as much because right now men are seen as the toxic ones, and and there's at least part of the culture that seems to say that there's nothing toxic about women, but there's absolutely a toxic version of femininity,
Yes.
or that is unhealthy, insecure, toxic, unaware, and immature. Absolutely. And so it happens on either side. So the toxic aspects of who we are as a group, if there's such a thing, the kind of fantasy group of men, even though every man is different and every man has their own unique expression, the man box or this kind of set of rules and what man should look like, that's way less nuanced than who men can be and are. And so it is necessarily reductive to try to define what men are supposed to look like, or what are what are masculine characteristics, because it reduces the nuances of what is really happening in the field. And that's actually a way of objectifying men, to say you need to be a man who fits these characteristics is erasive. It's like saying whatever you are that's really nuanced and really weird and quirky and interesting and has a little bit of everything is actually should not be that. Erase this, erase that, this needs to be removed, this needs to be cut off. Okay, now you fit. That's what's hurtful, and that's where there's conflict.
Yeah.
Because people are like, I am way more than that. And I see it as like the white box culture as well. I see it happening, like white people are like this. I'm like, no, they're not. It's not because you say that the white people belong in that little box right there that is actually the truth. The truth is that people are way more diverse than we can even understand ourselves. And so, yeah, the conflict to me is a conflict of authenticity. Is a difficulty to authentically fit into something that doesn't fit us, because it can never fit us.
So in terms of fitting, I want to ask you about that level 2, level 3 that you're talking about. Is there an end state goal is that something that someone is trying to attain? Is that just another box of rules? Is that another man box? Or is there some sort of, tell me about that.
Okay, so the way I look at it is that there's always further stages. Okay, so you could say, so in David Data, the way he defines it, which some people react against, and I understand that because I've done the same thing, is level 1 is the ego level. It's transactional. Men and women or people engage in transactions, I get what I want from you, and if I get it, I'm happy, and then you get what you want from me. So it's the ego level. So ego level is level 1. Level 2 is the egalitarian level. You get no more than I get, or we feel like it's equal, or equitable. Everything is equitable, everything is equal, and it has to be always like we have to reestablish equilibrium every time something gets off. That's level 2. Level 3 says, and each level is trying to improve on the previous level, right?
So
So
this
level
sounds a
3,
bit like scale of consciousness evolution
that's right.
or like
Yes.
spiral dynamics. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not
So
like,
Keegan's is kind of like that too.
okay.
Keegan.
Okay.
So the level 2 of David data would be more like Keegan's level 3, which is,
Okay.
all relationships have to be symmetrical.
So that sounds like spiral dynamics and green.
That's right.
Yeah.
Green meme.
Level
Right. But there's
level of
memes coming after.
consciousness 700.
Fuck yeah. I
Cool.
love this. Oh, I love that I can have this conversation and you can actually get ahead of me. And I'm like, exactly. Okay.
Perfect.
So level 3 in David Data says that you can embody different proportions of masculine, feminine qualities or modes of expression, and you can find an engaging level, engaging somebody to engage with that will have like a different mixture of feminine, masculine qualities, and that will create an interaction that is not egalitarian, but still fulfilling, and possibly even more fulfilling because it continues to be more interesting because it is not always in equilibrium. And that is how, in a way, you could look at this as the erotic impulse for life, where life
Wee.
doesn't happen by nothing happening. Life happens by things, by sort of things pushing against each other, and then new things emerging from that. So to the polarities that happen in level 3 of David Data is what creates this movement that is more interesting, less boring if you want to look at it that way, but also more creative as an engagement than the egalitarian process. But again, level 3 is trying to improve on level 2. Like level 2, yeah, everything being the same sexually, that's not going to create a lot of movement, so sexually or emotionally or relationally. So let's do level 3. Okay, so I believe there's a level 4.
Tell me more.
So level 3 to me feels like there's a way that you can get locked into always being in a polarity. And if there's no polarity, then you're back to level 2. And that would suck. So you try to avoid being back in level 2, and that can become sort of an unhealthy seeking of polarization. So I think level 4 is it's basically allowing for the polarity, but also allowing for the balancing, because always being in polarity can also become destructive. So
But it sounds
my
like
take is,
this level 4 is that stoicism. It's not, having that polar opposite, but it's allowing that neutrality to
yeah,
be able to hold both.
it's like the eye of the storm, so to speak. So
Okay.
the eye of the
Okay.
storm allows for the storm, but also allows for the quietness in the center. So yeah, it allows for both.
Okay.
And neither of them is locked into place. So that's my take on level 4. And yeah, so that's just, I don't know where I was coming from around this, but
It's all
yeah.
right.
Oh no,
It's going.
you were asking me about the box of yeah. I mean, and I think there's always higher levels that you can go to. At the same time, I think it's important. I mean, I see the world, what's happening in the world, especially with social media and people being in more and more and more conversations, that things are evolving extremely rapidly. And unfortunately, the rapidness of evolution means that it's very, very difficult to find a point of rest, a point of not just a point of rest, but a point of grounding.
Mm,
People's
mm, mm,
opinions, people's
mm,
sense of
mm.
what's okay, people's not sense of okay. Like for me, and I say for me because I don't know for everybody else, I can't speak for most men. Like it's funny that people try to speak for most of any group, because it's like it's really virtually impossible unless you know every single person, which you don't when you're talking about the large scale. So for me, the difficulty in gender roles becoming less and less well defined is that it's difficult to know if you're approaching anything that feels right from an external that you can externalize. So people have to figure out for themselves what feels right. But that's a high level of development.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
when you try to evolve yourself into something that doesn't have any outside reference point, there's the high possibility of internal abuse.
Let's go to that one. Let's talk about that internal abuse or other signs and symptoms.
Right.
I'll read a couple off this list.
Okay.
But those signs and symptoms that have led to these 70 diagnoses that people in mainstream
Yes.
therapy are
Yep.
feeling, let's see, in my previous conversations, I have over 100 signs and symptoms that people have listed for me already. So
Wow.
yeah, the anxiety and depression is there, some identity crisis, being
Yeah.
fragile,
Identity
or
crisis.
fragility. Yes.
Yes.
What are some of the other things? Like I chatted with someone on addiction. I chatted with another person on, just that inner conflict that happens in that internal abuse. But I love some of the things that you're saying. What are some of the other signs and symptoms that as you've worked with men, as you've even done the work on yourself, what does it
Yeah.
feel like?
I
Yeah.
mean, you already mentioned a lot of them. And so the crisis of identity, I think it's one of the big buckets, right? That you could put a lot of stuff in there, is not being able to settle on an identity that feels right, because there's nothing that tells you outside of yourself that it feels right. So you have to develop the inner sense of rightness without almost without reference points.
Mm. Mm.
But if you do that without reference points, then what you decide is going to be right for you may not be right for somebody else, and you still need to relate to others. So it has to work with others. Otherwise, you harm them, they harm you. In a way, you're relating to them in a way that is so different that eventually conflict and harm could happen. Conflict of reality. And then you have this classic conflict of my reality versus your reality, which then occurs to one or both people as gaslighting without intending it to be. But guess what? If it's 50 years ago and everybody knows what being a man looks like, then men are the way they're supposed to look like. And of course, it can be difficult for some people who don't feel like they fit. But at a relational community level, to actually know how men are supposed to be and how they're engaging, and how women are supposed to be and how they're engaged, that's actually creates more safety at the community fabric level.
The not having that reference point is providing safety?
No, the conformity that comes with gender roles, that kind of conformity is supportive of greater safety.
It is, yeah.
Because you know what rules everybody's playing by. Yes. But if nobody knows what rules they're supposed to play by, and they decide for themselves, and everybody's doing that, then you're trying to engage with somebody else, and you're like, what are your rules? And that's a higher level of conversation than hear what the rules are.
Yeah.
Or what are the rules you're playing? What are the agreements that you like to play by? And then it's all sort of highly moldable, moment to moment to moment. It's very difficult to rest in that.
Yeah, we've got somebody watching right now who says they're moving through this right now. I had another chat with someone, they chose not to go live, but they work a lot with the trans community. And you're talking about conformity and safety, and not just safety of peace of mind, but bodily harm and safety that becomes a concern. So is there anything more you want to say about that?
Well, trans, for example, is tricky because, I mean, it's not just trans, it's also how people view sexuality and gender roles. So gender identity, gender expression, sexual expression. I mean, it used to be a lot more simple. So when it's more simple, it's more more conformist. Now we're reaching a point of the conformity is nothing is simple. But nothing is simple is tough to handle by a lot of people. Like there's this sense that let's expand on what people can be individually. That can be more freeing. But individually, there's somebody who's going to lose out because they're like, I need simple.
Mm.
And they're being told that they're not allowed to be simple. Women are being told if they want to be feminine women like the women were in the 50s, that's regressive, that's
Mm.
wrong, that it's actually supporting harmful narratives about women. Like women in the first, second, in the first and second waves of feminisms are being told that what they used to believe and fight for, that gave the third wave and the post feminists or whatever that is right now,
Yep.
they're being told that they're being told, the first, second wave are being told that the way they look at feminism is wrong.
And that's archaic, and
And that's
it
archaic.
fulfills
Yeah.
gender roles and then
That's right.
stereotyping, and
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Or trans people who are like, I'm a transsexual. That's my identity. And they're being told that now you can't say that anymore. So the inherent fluidity that's arising is supportive of some people, but destructive to others. It is too fluid for it is fluid enough for some people, especially trans people, because they're in that, I think more so than a lot of people, they're in that fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's too fluid for a lot of other people. So
Yeah, we
even
just had
though
that comment come in that it might have been seen as simple, but if people aren't at that permission giving place, or the society isn't in that permission allowing phase, people are harmed, murdered, killed, locked away, or they're locked away in isolation in their own home because they can't conform enough for society.
Right. Well, and right now, conforming to society is you can't be an old school. I mean, one version of that is you can't be an old school man. You can't be an old school woman. That is regressive, and it is seen as the harmful man box, even though it could absolutely be the healthy, masculine, old school masculine. Absolutely. It's sorry, I'm swearing in your show.
Please do. I drop fuck bombs all the time.
Okay, cool. I try to do it sparingly. So there's both harm that can come from. There's a really great book by the same guy who wrote The Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's called Lila, and the whole book is about static versus dynamic patterns. Static patterns are there to create change. They're there to basically upgrade whatever was static. So static patterns are there to hold the level of development. Right? Static patterns just keep things the way they are, and dynamic patterns are there to change the way things are into something different. Too much of this is stagnancy. It's like Rome. What happened with Rome? Decadence is decadence, right? It's just, it remains this way too long and eventually it falls apart. Dynamic patterns are there to make change, but too much of change, eventually it's like growing. It's like a tree that keeps on growing, but not enough roots. The roots are the static patterns, and it keeps growing, not enough roots, and eventually the tree topples. The same can be true in culture. If you change culture too much, there isn't enough for people to rely on anymore that's stable, then the safety, the safety of stability kind of evaporates. And then nobody can have conversations because everybody can have whatever opinions they want. And that's what we're seeing on social media. People are going after each other. And my belief is that as things evolve in social media, is people will sort of retreat back to their echo chambers, which they already have done to some degree, and there's going to be an erection of more and more boundaries between, to create those safe bubbles. So it is a sort of a going back to people's like spiral dynamic memes, so to speak, where they know who's, how people are playing by the rules within their own group. The problem is that they're also regressing back to looking at other groups as being wrong. So that's sort of reverting back to tribalism within within the internet, and you see that in men's movements as well, like men going their own way, and
Yeah.
men having been red pilled or black pilled. I mean, this is all sort of like returning back to, okay, well, like we're being attacked from the outside, so we're just going to create our own safe bubble and do our own thing, which is
We could even
healthy
talk
to
about
some degree.
blue pilled.
Oh God, I don't even have the blue pill. I don't even know about the blue pill. I just
I'm
remember
thinking
when.
Viagra.
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, that's its own thing, right? So at a sexual level, to have a hard cock is to have a good cock, and is to be virile. And as the population is aging and becoming, and essentially the machinery still works, but it changes. We're entering into dynamics of people wanting to continue to engage sexually much later than maybe they were before, and also much more heavily than they used to when they had a family, and they would have kids. They would have 10 kids, and there was no sex for fun, just a generation ago, or 2 generations ago, I should say, because now I'm getting older. uh, so, and also there's the issue of women having to deal with, am I going to have kids, am I not going to have kids, and I want kids, but I don't have a partner who wants to stay with me, because the old fashioned ways of being together actually no longer exist, which then causes more single motherhood. I mean, I know plenty of women who are like, I don't have a partner, but I'm going to have a kid anyway.
Mhm.
But then what happens when the kid grows up and doesn't have a stable a role model of a father who is a healthy, who is probably the first and strongest, potentially strongest expression of healthy masculinity, or a healthy fatherhood, or a healthy man. So
Yeah, so
so
I had
so
a great
yeah.
question that came in earlier. I'm going to bring it into this space.
Okay, please. I'm kind
And
of
it was
riffing right now
someone,
anyway.
oh, I love it. It's working. I'm filling in all my question boxes.
Oh my God,
Um,
that's great.
so they grew up in a home with both parents, but other men were in the home,
Mhm.
father and their 2 brothers and a male cousin. But they felt that most of their manly traits came from the women in the family, and seeing
Oh
how
yeah.
men then interacted with them or how they handled it. And the relationship with their father was either that he was never a role model, or he just wasn't, or he was just there.
Yeah.
So, in terms of learning, when those, like we talked about, boxes and ways that these rules get written by
Mhm.
having father or male figures around, how does that play with emotions and life and relationships if that wasn't a good man example?
Well, I mean, I think I think women bring great qualities to the table. So if that's if that's what a boy gets as he grows up, he's gonna get a lot of qualities that are more, that I wouldn't necessarily call that more feminine, but more qualities that are being embodied by women in this time and age, which I think include more and more masculine qualities, because women are, especially because birth control is so reliable now. Women, the gender roles are changing and evolving and becoming more diverse, and women can have the life that they want without being dependent on a man, which never had to be that way, but it evolved from there. uh, I think when both men and women are exhibiting more qualities of what used to be just the other side. So I think that's great. I think more good, healthy qualities is great. And at the same time, we still live in a world where men are where there's multiple generations of men acting in society. And so the older men are still engaging with this prior generation of masculinity. Let's call it that way. I don't necessarily see it as better or worse, but there's pros and cons with each of them. And so the younger men are engaging with the older men, and the older men are like, you know, like, you need to be tougher, otherwise you can't play with me.
Mm. So they're
And
gatekeeping.
well, of course they're gatekeeping, because we come from a society where nature used to try to kill us every chance it got. And now we're growing at this point in the game right now. We're growing in a society where that doesn't really happen anymore, and medicine is keeping us alive better than ever before. So there is no need for gatekeeping, but that's what these older generations of men
Mm.
grew up with. Like, you had to be tough, otherwise you would die. Like, you
Yeah.
were talking about 1 or 2 generations ago, you would have 10 kids, 5 of them would live. I mean, that's nature for you, and not necessarily the wolf in the forest, but just medicine wasn't that far to keep you alive. And so all kinds of diseases would pop up and try to kill your kids or kill you. And so, yeah, people had to be tough. And of course, they didn't know that being tough really, well, I mean, in terms of nature, to some degree, it helped, but I don't think it helped that much in terms of diseases.
Mm.
But being tough was seen as a good thing, because that's all you that I think that's all you had to intend for when living was tough, and you would live until 50 or 60 or 70. But
Mm.
now we can live a lot later, and we're not being killed so easily. So yeah, for there so yeah, as a population, both men and women, we can start to explore other qualities that didn't seem to matter as much at the time, but now we can sort of include. And also, more single mothers are raising their children, and as a result, they're teaching their kid everything they have to know, which is essentially, they're teaching through, I mean, through their method of education, but also teaching by who they are.
Mm.
That's the biggest way you're teaching, regardless of what you do. You can intend, but your kids are just soaking up who you are,
Yeah.
and
So
whoever they hang out with, in terms of people watching them and playing with, and the kids they're playing with are being impacted by who they're being raised by. So it's all sort of happening that way.
the more societal pressures of community.
Well, I mean, society. I mean, you call it societal pressure, but it's just it's just by the way people rub off against each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that necessarily pressure, although you could look at tropes, of tropes, or sort of oversimplistic expression, like the man box. That's oversimplified. There's really a lot more nuances around that of that, and if you look deeper into Stoicism, then you'll discover a lot more about it that I feel is really healthy. And I think
Mm.
the Greek were super healthy in their exploration of life and philosophy, and enough that that's still carried to this day. It was solid
Yeah.
enough as true that it's still carried to this day. But we're facing things today that they were not facing back then, and so it's some of it is difficult to engage with. But I think, in general, like you mentioned, fragility at some point, and I think fragility is a direct expression of the opposite of toughness.
Mm.
But fragility also allows for, yeah, like a healthy version of that, I would say, is sensitivity. Like, I say this guy, I'm French Canadian, so being sensitive often sounds bad in English, but having the sensitivity to engage well with others and to kind of feel into them. That's useful. There's a healthy version of that. But if you're really sensitive, then by it's if you haven't built resilience because you haven't been tested, then you'll be fragile. And if you're tough and you haven't built, instead of building toughness, if you build resiliency instead of toughness, then you're not just unfeeling, you're actually feeling, but it doesn't throw you off. So there's sensitivity and resilience, and then further in that direction there's toughness, and further in that direction is fragility. So to stay within the range of this is useful and healthy is really tricky unless you have the right kind of role models. and the role models of what it's like to be a man are kind of disappearing. They're kind of disappearing, or the role models become women because that's what's available.
So I've seen it a lot more as I've started into my own transformation, re-evolution work. And men doing the work is the new sexy. Men doing this is now this
Yeah.
aspiration. And with some of, I love your opinion, you know, because men's circles used to be, you know, historically something that was always happening. And it's not as frequently seen.
Mm. Well, I mean, I know it's present because it's I'm part. I used to be, well, I'm still part of a men's circle from a long time ago that to me occurred as pretty rough and tough. And I was part of a team called Petros, which means stone in Greek. So yeah, it was a tough team. Not all of them were like that, but it actually, I really feel like it gave me a toughness that was missing, that eventually sort of evolved into resilience. But initially, so back to our initial conversation around around like the man box, or around like in or like being a tourist somewhere, is that you start out with the surface level stuff, and the only way to go deeper than that is by having access to that deeper wisdom.
Mm.
And where is the deeper wisdom? Okay, it's in books, it's in some shows, it's in people, it's in mentors, it's in, hopefully it's in your father, your grandfather, it's in their legacy, it's in the deeper conversations of what what you learn from these people as you grew up, if you grew up with them, or who are some of the people you can look at and say, okay, I want to be more like that when I grow up, even if you're
Mhm.
30 or 40 or 50. Like, who are the people you can sort of follow in their footsteps that are a healthy expression of, and a deeper expression that otherwise you would be missing if you just looked at what's out there in social media and in movies and in shows.
Yeah. So this has been a great conversation. We could go into so many more tangents and so many more conversations.
Yeah, totally.
Um, I have my questions answered. Is there anything else you want to add to this? Is there any way, let's say somebody jumped in this and they were like, wow, what he's saying really resonates with me. I want to connect with him. I want to work with him. Tell the people how to contact you or what you're offering.
Yeah, so just to go back to what I said at the beginning, what I'm offering is a path to sovereignty,
Mm,
which includes developing your inner wisdom, which is massively important. You have to start with something. You have to start with what you've got. If you try to start with something else, then it won't fit. You have to start with, this is what I've got. And what you've got could be all the messages, all the rules, all the things you've learned that are kind of twisted or off the mark, or whatever it is. You start with that without shame. You map out what are these things that you have, and then you map out, what do you want to become. What are some of the role models? And there are role models. They might not look like somebody in the media. They might look like somebody you know in your life who's got a life that works. And I'm speaking both in terms of masculinity, or in terms of wisdom, or in terms just of their life. And it could be a man or a woman. Ultimately, you have to have a sense of what you want. And usually the reason you don't have it is because there are things that get in the way. Either in your current situation, you don't have access to you don't have access to the resources, you don't have access to the beliefs that will allow you to get there. And that's why you don't have that. You can vision it, but that's not enough to get there. So what I do with my clients, and what I do with the participants in the classes that I teach, is I support them in taking the steps, step by step, to make that journey from being immature to becoming mature, from being insecure to becoming secure, from being
mm.
unaware to becoming more aware. So, and a lot of our coaching looks like this kind of conversation, like we're having. What's happening out there? Understand what's happening inside, what's happening out there, how this interacts, the conflicts that arise, and then we go step by step with someone. Hopefully, that's what I like to think I bring, is
Yeah.
is these resources and these perspectives that are missing from the table, that otherwise you get stuck in mired in your own muck, and you don't know how to get out of it. So that's what
Mm,
I'm here for. I'm here to support you in getting you unstuck from the muck of your own life, wherever
mm,
you're at, and taking the steps and getting cleaner and cleaner and getting more and more in integrity with what really matters to you. And then beyond that,
wow.
I'm co-creating this international men's circle or men's group called the Remember Brothers. And see, so it's
Mm,
remen with like the word men in the middle, remember, and so the journey that we do with each other is called the Remember Brotherhood journey. And it's to bring men from all over the world, different cultures, different walks of life, and we all get together, and we go on this journey of remembering what it's like to be a man. Again, like I said before, both in terms of your lineage, but also in terms of what are your own particular gifts, that if you brought that to the table, you become one more facet of the gem or the jewel of manhood or brotherhood. So it's
mm,
not about competition, and it's about what you have to bring to the table that has purpose, that has vision, and that has skill, that has experience, that you know how to handle really well. And then you bring that to the table, and all the men and all the brothers bring that to the table, and they can all look at each other and say, okay, we're here together and we're here to support each other, and now we can learn to connect and trust and open up about these places that are still tender inside of us, or that are hurt, or
yeah.
that are in conflict, as you spoke, whether it's
Yeah.
gender conflict with partners. And then because we can open up and we can see each other, we can feel that strength in numbers that we can have
Mm,
together. So
mm.
that's sort of the long answer to your many of your short questions. So
It's
the way
okay.
you
So
can,
how can
yeah,
people reach out to you?
yes, that's right. So you can find me at exquisitedark.love. And I say the word dark is because life is messy. Life is dark
Mm,
and messy, but there's ways to move from there, use that messiness and turn it into something that's really useful. And so exquisitedark.love or rememberjourney.com to come and find out about the men's circle, about the men's journey and the brotherhood. And right now we're working on one that's about to happen in September. We haven't figured out the date. We're just in conversation today about the dates. Probably end of September, early October, and it's an online journey. So normally our journeys are together in the jungle in Costa Rica, at a friend's venue, at a friend's that he built himself.
amazing.
Yeah, he's a brother. He was part of the journey too. And but because of COVID, it's a little bit more difficult for people to travel. So we invite you to join us online. It's 4 days, 3 days, 4 hours, and one extra day of integration, 4 hours. And it's super affordable, super accessible. And we went incredibly deep. We were completely
Mm,
surprised by, and there's four of us leading it. And so if you've never seen four men co-leading something and sharing power in a beautiful and powerful way, that's one way to go about it. And
mm.
we're constantly surprised by how well we align and balance each other, because a square is not inherently balanced, but we found ways to do it, and it's just gorgeous to watch and be a part of. So please
Mm.
join us.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been so helpful in answering some of my questions and bringing different voices and different perspectives into this and opting to go live. There's a lot of people who might not know that this exists. This circle is here.
Hmm.
And whether it's that this conversation brings about someone to feel a little more normal about what might be going on.
Beautiful.
That's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I started opting to go online with some of these interviews, because I've got a pretty great network of people that if I'm
Good.
not for you, cool, I'm not for everyone. But if I can connect you with somebody who is an epic practitioner who can help you get to where you want to be, I want to amplify those voices. And, understanding, who I am as a woman showing up in this world, as a white woman showing up in this world, I also honor that I don't know everything,
Hmm.
and to allow those platforms of people who can do amazing things. I thank you so much for being here and for allowing others to see how they could work with you, but how life can be, or how it sucks when it is, and ways that it can come back to finding that exquisiteness in who they are. I really love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your questions and your wanting to put that on the table, put that on the table for others to see. And I enjoy it. And that was a rare, beautiful conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And I can't wait to connect in the future.
Yeah, likewise.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.